Today's Moravian reading is John 18, verse 19 to 40. Now, quite a bit is happening in this passage. Jesus has been arrested, he's been taken to the high priest's house. At first, Annas, the high priest's father in law, is questioning Jesus, and now the high priest questions him. And if you know your Old Testament, you'll know that people could be put on trial by the priesthood. That's how society functioned. And if a person was found guilty of a religious crime like blasphemy, then the high priest had the power to sanction them to be stoned to death. Of course, there were an awful lot of Old Testament conditions placed in Scripture to protect people and guard people against injustice. But these people, these priests, they were happy to ignore these scriptures. The trial had to be held during the daytime, but it was nighttime. There had to be two witnesses speaking in defense of the accused. That was the first set of witnesses, but they were not allowed in. You had to sleep before on any guilty verdict before delivering a guilty verdict the next day to allow time for mercy. But they weren't interested in that. They were more concerned with holding on to their power rather than recognizing who Jesus was, which would mean they would have to surrender to his power. And when Jesus points out to them that they really should be interviewing witnesses if they want to know the truth, then they strike him in the face. Of course, then they decide to take Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. They probably think, well, we're not going to get anywhere trying to trap Jesus on his theology. So if they can't get him to admit his claim to be God, they'll get him to claim to be a king. And then Pilate will have him killed for treason against Caesar. So they take Jesus to Pilate. And as they do so, as they move through the courtyard, we read how Peter denies that he knew Jesus 2 more times. It's the 3rd time, and the cock crows, just as Jesus had prophesied it would. It's now early in the morning. The historian Josephus, he records that Pilate was an inflexible and ruthless man, a man insensitive to Jewish culture. Well, perhaps there's certainly evidence of that, but here in this passage, we see some awareness of Jewish culture. We see some flexibility. He wants the Jews to deal with it. He'd rather hand Jesus over to the mob to be stoned to death. But as John points out, it was Jesus's intention to be crucified, to be hung on a tree. And for that to happen, it would have to be Pilate who gave the order, the death sentence. So Pilate asks Jesus, "Are you a king?" And Jesus answers plainly. In doing so, he seals his fate. But we see here in Jesus's words some powerful revelation of who Jesus is. Jesus is the king of a new kind of kingdom. Unlike earthly kingdoms that come or go, unlike earthly kingdoms where people need to take up arms to defend the kingdom or extend the kingdom, this kingdom, its advancement does not depend on that sort of human effort and conflict. It is a kingdom characterized by truth. And Pilate picks up on this idea, doesn't he? He says, what is truth anyway? He's clearly been educated and aware of the Greek philosophers and their debates around truth. Is it absolute? Is it relative and personal? Just so like today, isn't it? People's ideas of truth today. And this sort of goes in Jesus's favor. It's almost like Pilate saying, well, what is truth? If he thinks he's a king, then good for him. We've all got our own truths. And I think that is why in today's society that is so like that we have to demonstrate the truthfulness of the gospel. Yes, through our testimonies are powerful, but more than that, nowadays people, they tend to hear your testimony and think, wonderful, good for you, great for you, but it's not for me. So today, things like praying for people to be healed, is a powerful witness. Praying for people to encounter God, revisiting apologetics and reasons for God's existence. These are really important tools in our witness in this cultural moment in which we live, this pluralistic culture. Finally, Barabbas, the guilty one, is set free and Jesus is sentenced to death. It's a Passover tradition because at the Passover, the Israelite slaves were set free from Egypt. And an exchange, a substitution takes place to celebrate that. The innocent for the guilty. You see, even when the powers of darkness are trying to do their worst, God is redemptively outworking his salvation plan. And that's exactly what he's done for us, isn't it? We are like Barabbas, the guilty who get to go free. So have a blessed day, resting in the truth of that and the completed work of Christ.